I really want them to understand what they own and what's on the table and what the pros and the cons and the tax consequences of each asset there is, and really try to customize something that's like works best for them and their family.
Welcome everyone to Pulling Threads. Today I'm very excited. We have Melissa Pavone. Am I saying that correct, Melissa?
Yes, you are.
Who is a certified financial planner and a certified divorce financial analyst with over a decade of experience helping individuals navigate divorce with clarity and confidence. As the founder of Mindful Divorce Partners, everyone knows how much I love mindfulness, so I love your business name. Melissa specializes in collaborative divorce planning, financial education, and helping clients make informed decisions during one of life's most challenging transitions. She is also the author of Divorce by Design, a practical guide to building the right divorce team and protecting your financial future. Welcome to Pulling Threads, Melissa. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me.
I have so many questions, and I'm in a few divorce groups, and someone just a couple days ago asked if anyone had a referral for the forensics financial analyst. And is that your official, would that be what you would be called, a forensic accountant?
The forensic accountant and a CDFA are a little different, but there is definitely some overlap. So sometimes if it's sort of, I say above my pay grade, right, we'll call in a true forensic, but sometimes it's just separate property tracing or trying to figure out if it's marital or separate property. And that falls within the wheelhouse of the CDFA. So sometimes we have to refer out if it's sort of like, okay, we're transmuting money and things are going to all different accounts and sort of hiding things like that. But oftentimes the CDFA can sort of follow the paper trail and be able to get it back.
Okay, that's really good to know. So when you are working in collaborative divorces, are you also considered the financial neutral?
So the great thing about a CDFA is you can be a financial neutral, which is when two parties hire you together and you don't work for one individual, but instead the family. And we can do that within mediation and collaborative. And then we can also be brought in as an advocate, again, through mediation, or if it does become litigious in court. And sometimes, even if you're in an amicable setting, I think if there's a financial literacy discrepancy between the two partners, or one person was sort of the CFO of the family, it's nice if you need a little bit more handholding to have a CDFA as an advocate and in your corner.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I want to back up a little bit to how you got here. You originally were in financial planning and you pivoted into this specific divorce financial guidance. What caused you to make that pivot?
It was always something I was interested in. I received my CDFA in 2015, so it's been over a decade, but I wasn't truly utilizing it in the capacity that I'm doing now, right? I had the education, I had the credential, and I was helping my clients through financial planning and, knew enough about it. But it was really something I was passionate about. And it goes back, why is my mom? I'm a child of divorce. And so my mom made a lot of decisions with her heart instead of her head. And it has impacted her financial future. And so I really have made it my mission to really make sure that I educate my clients and really empower them to make the best decisions for their individual journey. And no two divorces look exactly the same. And I think that sort of a misconception, right? That we should sort of just like 50-50, divide in half, equitable. And if you choose, right, to choose the amicable path and to do mediation or collaborative, or there's actually this new process called Soul Agree, you have the ability to customize it for your family. And I think that's really, really important. And most people don't know that, right? They just think sort of, okay, I get a lawyer, you get a lawyer, we go to court. And that doesn't have to be that way.
No, I think that most people think that too. And it's why people don't get divorced when they kind of both want to and they avoid it. It's why, it's so much better to do it privately or, as you said, in a customized fashion. And then you get to make all of the choices, not a judge who doesn't know you or your family. But it does take collaboration, and it does take some degree of amicable two
Yeah.
amicable people, or
And
what people want to
participation,
be.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Mediation or collaboration won't work unless there is true participation and the willingness, right, for disclosure and, to work
yeah.
together. I think that's really important. And I try to frame everything right through the lens of the children, right? Like,
Yep,
let's do it as a family unit and let's make sure what's in the best interest of the children.
yeah.
And I
Things
think
get so much
usually, even
easier
if
when
they
you do that.
don't, yeah, and usually, even if they don't like each other, right, or if there's heightened emotions, they both love their children, right, and want to do
Yep.
what's best for their children. So it's that simple mindset shift of like, hey, our kids need two parents to
Yep.
on the other side of this. I think that's really important.
Yeah, so important. And it makes every single decision easier. It might not be that you like the outcome of every decision, but every decision is easier when you put it through the filter of the children, what's best for the children. Every single issue, I believe. I think that I hear lots of stories of people where a financial neutral wasn't really neutral, or people are intimidated by one party or the other. So I do think that does happen. It happens even in collaborative and even in mediation. But overall, like, most people hear the word divorce and they think chaos, they think conflict, they think loss of control. I think your business model, as well as mine, the goal is to flip that script and design a divorce instead. For you, that's really the name of your book and your program. For me, it's more about teaching my clients to navigate and get through, have nervous system preparation, have meeting preparation and tools in their toolbox to make the process, it's never going to be easy, but easier. So,
Right.
to you, what does it mean to flip that from chaos and conflict to a designed divorce?
Yeah, absolutely. And my whole book and my whole sort of mantra is about designing the divorce team. And it
Mm,
starts with people like you, right? We want mental health professionals, we want divorce coaches, we need that emotional regulation. That's number
mm,
one. So when people come to me and they're like, okay, I'm getting divorced, here's all my numbers. And if I could tell that they're not quite ready, one of
mm.
my first questions is like, do you have who's on your support team? Do you have a
Yep.
mental health professional? Do you have a coach? Because that's really important. And if they say no, then we sort of pause and say, okay, we need to get that in place first and then come back to me. And
Mm,
here's a list of referrals, right? That
yeah.
will might work for you. And I'm happy to make warm introductions. And I firmly believe that because
Mhm.
if not, I become that mental health person for them.
Yeah.
And that's not my zone of genius. I
Right.
am not prepared. So it's not fair to me. And it's not fair to them because they're not getting the advice, right, that you have, right? And that
Right.
knowledge and expertise that you have. And so I really like to stay in my lane and do what I do best. And so I'm happy to refer that out. And I love that team approach, right? Because you might be
Yeah.
able to uncover something during sessions with you, right? That with authorization so that we can talk and collaborate together, right? I know how to frame the work, right? If
Right.
spreadsheets are overwhelming, right, then
Mm,
we shift, right? How I present the data. If we can't
yeah.
go longer than an hour in meetings for attention deficit, right, we take breaks. So the more
Mm,
information I know about my clients, right, and that you, as the emotional support person, can provide me, the better I can do my job and the better supported our clients are together.
for a second, I'm so sorry. Sorry, I'm gonna scrap that part out. I
Okay.
sent my son, I put my phone on airplane mode. I told him he could not call me. I sent him a text, but he's 12 and he doesn't. I'm so sorry.
Yes, you're good.
Do you mind just repeating the last
Yeah,
thing that you said? Sorry.
no, you're fine. I'm trying to remember where we left off. That's okay.
You were talking about the collaboration and getting the right people in the room.
It makes perfect sense for us to work together and for everyone to stay in their lane and do what they do best, right? If they have somebody in that emotional support seat, they can come to the meetings with me fully
Yeah.
present to understand the numbers
Yep.
And then if they understand the numbers, right, we can organize it, get the financial affidavit, get our list of questions. And then when they're ready for that legal support, they're coming in knowing what their financial landscape looks like, their nervous system regulated, with two people supporting them and now a third person right on that legal side. And you have a whole team around you doing what
Yep.
they do best.
I love that you want to put the mental health person there first. I think for most people who come to me, the first thing they want to do is they want to know about money. And I get it because I was exactly the same way. I remember asking nonstop, how much do you think the alimony is going to be? How much do you think? And my attorney was like, we are not even close. We are months away from knowing the answer to that question, which is terrifying because what you really want to know is, am I going to be okay? Am I going to be able to
Yeah.
support my kids? Am I going to be okay? Can I go ahead and go back to school or get retraining, or do I need to go get a job? And there's so much panic for most of us around money. I work with a lot
Absolutely.
of women like myself who paused their career. I stopped being a lawyer. I had a 10-year break. So I couldn't jump back in and just go back to being a lawyer. I knew I needed re education. So it was terrifying to think of I would come out of this situation and not be able to support the kids. So I wanted that number right away. However, in hindsight, now I know I was in fight or flight still. I
Yeah.
needed the therapist intact, and I wish I had a coach. I didn't. That's one of the reasons why I do what I do now, to teach me the nervous system regulation, because what I experience and what so many people experience is that they go into these meetings and they get triggered. Their nervous system gets triggered. PTSD is triggered. They don't know what they were agreeing to. They don't remember details of the meeting. I was
Yeah.
really fortunate in my collaborative meetings that there was always notes taken and we were given the notes after. And my attorney would call me after they debriefed and we would do another debrief. But there were a couple of times when the financial pieces were discussed that I went completely, because I, like you, had a mother who didn't do so well in her divorce and didn't protect herself. And so there was a lot of years of struggle for us. And that's my memory of divorce and childhood. So the fear in my own divorce was intensified by that trauma. So sitting in the meeting, you get triggered, and all of a sudden your frontal lobe shuts down. So it's important for people to have the coach and or the therapist in place to teach them what to do and how to know that that's happening.
Yeah.
So,
See the signs before it
right,
happens.
if I get chest pain or all of a sudden I feel like I'm almost in a fog, I know, okay, I can't make any big decisions right now. And I had a system in place with my attorney where if I was thrown off, we had pre-discussed decisions that she could make for me or speak for me. A lot of the people I work with do not have that kind of relationship with their attorney, and that's not their divorce experience.
Yeah.
So I love that you can help people build this team, first of all, and that's what your book is about, because the team is critical. And it's not just one person. People also
No.
think they're just going into a divorce with a lawyer, and that's not all you need. So,
No, it's not.
how does the team how does the team typically become assembled your in the cases that you work on?
I think it really depends. I think oftentimes people don't know they need a team, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes I get clients from divorce coaches who they're in therapy or they're in a coaching program and they're quietly thinking about divorce. And then, right, they say, hey, what's my next step?
Yeah.
And then they bring me on. Other times, right, they're with an attorney or they're with a mediator and they might be in the process, right, in the thick of it. And
Yep.
at that point, then either the mediator or the attorney is like, hey, this is above my pay grade. We need to pull somebody in, right? I don't know how to
Right.
tax impact this. I want to make sure that you're understanding this.
Right.
And I've been brought in, right, even in mediation cases where the mediator was asked, are you understanding it? Because they saw the eyes glaze over, right? They saw
Yeah.
sort of like that system, that nervous system, flight, fight, or freeze.
Right.
Sometimes it could just be like a paralysis of like not making any decisions, right? And sometimes the process really stalls because one person can't make a decision. They're stuck. And so sometimes I get brought in those cases, and that person might want a neutral, or they might need a neutral, or I've been brought in to be like, hey, even though we're in an amicable process, this party needs an advocate for them, right? They
Yeah.
need you to explain and really handhold because they've never handled the finances before and it's overwhelming. And
Yeah.
so I can come in and meet my clients where they're at. So it depends, right? Sometimes they come to me first and then I sort of backtrack and say, hey, I'm here, but let's
Yeah.
start with the emotional support, right? And then come back and we build that team out. So it really just depends where they are, but I'm such a big proponent of that. And even after divorce, right, that who am I now post divorce transition is
Right.
really important too.
Yes. Yes. How do you think that the team someone assembles around their divorce changes the outcome financially and emotionally?
It's funny because I think a lot of people, there's a misconception that if I have three people, right, that it's going to cost more. Like, how
Hmm.
can I can't afford three people. I already have an attorney, right? And
Right.
I want to debunk that myth because the truth of the matter is you don't want your attorney organizing your financial statements and building your marital balance sheet and doing your financial affidavit because I can do that much faster because that is what I do best. And my hourly rate is probably half the rate of the
Right.
attorney, right? So you're saving money there. And
Right.
in retrospect, you don't want to come to me to vent about what happened at the bus stop or the birthday party, right? Or the text message chain, because one, I'm not equipped for that, right? And I'm not going to give you the proper advice or guidance that you need. And two, you need somebody that's prepared and you don't want to spend your time and money on me, right? When you can sort of work with a coach and their fee is less than my fee. So by
Right.
assembling the team, it's really more efficient, both in time and money. And
Right.
what I hate is when people are like, hey, I don't know what's going on. I'm scared to call my attorney. They bill in 6 minute increments, right? When sometimes through this process, you just need a direct line to your coach, right? To say,
Yep.
hey, I'm sort of freaking out right now. Is this normal? What should I do? Right.
Right.
Instead of blowing through your retainer and using your attorney as your to vent.
Right. Either you're emotional. I know my attorney said to me in my divorce, like, you can, if you want to pay me to tell me all this, you can, but I don't
I
think you want
know.
to. And she said it once. And I was like, oh, yes,
Got it.
you are correct. I do not want to pay X dollar amount for you to hear this story. So she
Yeah.
was great about doing that, but a lot of attorneys aren't. I see that too. I see so many of my clients in shock when they get their first statement. And they're like,
Yeah.
oh my God, how have I already spent $20,000? And I'm like,
Right. And there's no progress made,
because
right? Not,
you're
yeah.
forwarding every single email. So I have strategies and I have like a list of things to help reduce the cost of the attorney by being more efficient in your emails. Don't send an email with one question. Wait and bundle them up and have them written down. And when you have meetings, all these things, but people don't know. And if there's high conflict, and just so many of the clients that when they come to me, they're already in fight or flight and they have
Yeah.
been for a while. Um,
Yeah.
so, what are the financial decisions that people make most often during a divorce that really come back to haunt them?
I think the biggest sort of one that I think happens often is the marital residence. One
Mhm.
party really usually wants to keep the marital residence and is anchored to that from the beginning.
Yeah.
So when we go over that, I always say, is this because you're not ready to move? Is it because you don't want your kids to change school districts? Is it because you can't, you know, like there's so many questions, right? And that's where the coach comes in to really unpack
Mhm.
and peel back the layers of the onion, right? Because I've seen people who say, I'm keeping the house no matter what. And then in retrospect, right, they've given up maintenance, right, or they took less in retirement. And now you have this huge, usually, right, house that may or may not be paid off, that is an illiquid asset, and that right needs a lot of repairs. So we always say, like, okay, yes, we can afford the mortgage payment and the insurance and the taxes, right? But can you afford to fix the roof by yourself?
Right.
Can you afford to change the boiler, right? If we need a new boiler or hot water heater, those are the things that I need to make sure before we agree to this, that there's an emergency fund there and that we have liquidity to be able to maintain the house. And it becomes more expensive, right? Just
Yeah.
because one less person is living there, the electric bill's the same, right? The
Yep.
cable bill's the same. The electric is the same. The expenses don't go down in divorce, and the household is now has to be supported on one income. So people don't necessarily think that. So we really have to, we get those fears and we replace them with facts. And
Yeah.
that's really important because, like you said before, people are so nervous. Like, am I going to be okay? Can I retire? Will my kids be able to go to college? All of these things. Can I afford this? And we don't know, right? Until we actually plug numbers in on the paper and see what it could look like. And then
Right.
you are empowered with knowledge and facts. And that clarity lifts the shoulder, right? It's not necessarily
Mhm.
what's going to happen because nobody has a crystal ball, but to say this is the best case scenario, this is the worst case scenario, and we're going to
Right.
probably fall somewhere in between them, right? But we have those boundaries and those barriers. And then if you know what your floor is, right, you can go
Yeah.
in level headed to
Right.
negotiation. And I always ask people, like, what are your needs? What are your wants? And what are your wishes, right? We're not going to get
Yeah.
everything. This is a
Hmm.
negotiation. This is really a compromise, right? But if Thanksgiving every year on the family trip is really important, right? What are we willing to give up for that? And it's
Yep.
not always dollars, right? And money, but sometimes it's time.
Yeah. I think emotions, there's emotional attachment to, as you said, houses so often, but there's also an emotional attachment to time and time,
Yeah.
especially if there are children involved. And in many, many cases, it's 50-50. And I think because I work with women, the mothers are just like, they can't imagine not having their kids for half the time. But that's where people end up, I think, making negotiations sometimes to get the kids more and not realizing even the financial impact of that. So it's like,
Yeah.
okay, they're going to be with you more. They're going to be with you more. It's going to cost more. And they're like, I don't care. I'll take, if I can get 75-25 with my kids, I'll take less money. They're going to cost
And
you more
more
now. Like
money.
you
Yeah.
have to think this through because having them, even we have every other weekend with their dad. And even when he misses a weekend and I'm like providing meals for them for that weekend, I'm like, oh, this is extra. I got to have
Unaccounted for,
groceries in
right?
the
Yeah.
house when I was expecting them to be gone. I think emotions interfere a lot. And that was kind
Absolutely.
of my next question. How do emotions interfere with financial clarity? And can there be financial clarity during divorce when there are so many emotions? Like, what do you see
If you have a
helping?
good coach and a good team, yeah. And I think that's really important, like what you said, because not all money is created equal, right? I always
Mhm.
say, I use the example, we can have $250,000 worth of equity in the house and $250,000 worth of money in a money market account and $250,000 in a retirement 401k and then $250,000 in a Roth IRA. And all on paper, right? They look equal today. But all four of those numbers are different. Their tax impact, the ability to access them, what they're invested in. So that's really important to break it down because people just say, okay, 250, you take this 250, I'll take this 250. But it's not that simple. And if
Mm-mm.
somebody who doesn't have that financial literacy, right, or that ability to have a CDFA on their team, they might accept something thinking that it's fair right? Oh, my
Right.
250 and your 250, we're good, we're even, it's equitable, not realizing that they might not be able to touch that money, right, until they're 59 and a half. And then they might have to pay tax on that money. And they might have been better off with the $250,000 in cash, right?
Yep.
So I really go through very slowly and create and foster an environment that people can ask questions. And I really want them to understand what they own and what's on the table and what the pros and the cons and the tax consequences of each asset there is,
Yep.
and really try to customize something that's like works best for them and their family, right? And a lot of questions, and I always say we're going to get financially naked. And sometimes people are like, "Ugh, like, why do you need to know all of these things, you know?"
Yeah.
And I said, the
Yes.
more I know about you, and your spouse, the better advice I can give you, and the better we can craft something. So if somebody is a spender, right? If there's an addiction, if there's an inheritance coming, if there's separate property, or like all of these things matter, right? When we're sort of crafting what works best, because the more I know, again, the better advice I can guide you with.
Yeah, I have um, an acquaintance who they had multiple properties. And I guess this is tied to my next question. Not all properties are created equal either. And a lot of people have investment properties. And I'm personally say like doing your due diligence and visiting those properties, especially if your spouse was the one managing that property, maybe they're rentals and they were managing it, like march yourself in to each and every one of them, probably get an inspector, like maybe even appraisals, because I have multiple people who've agreed, okay, you take this rental and you take that multi unit, and they think everything is getting divided equally, and then realize the one they got is in, yes, like it's a
Yeah.
mess and like it's costing them thousands of dollars, which they don't have to get things repaired. So, I mean, I'm sure part of what you're doing is encouraging people to do their due diligence and make sure, and we don't just guess on
Yeah.
numbers.
No. And it's funny because some clients get like really aggravated with me because I say I'm like the devil's in the details. If I'm
Hmm.
to dot my I's and cross my T's, and I want to see feeds, I want to see statements. I don't want to just see screenshots, right? I don't want to just see, I need to see true financials. I need to see tax returns. And everyone gets like so, and I'm like,
Oh,
we have to see if those tax returns, what have they been depreciating these buildings? Like, is there going to be tax implications that could happen, right?
yep.
But we don't know that unless we dig deeper. And that's my job, right? To
Yeah.
really shine light on all of the assets and all of the liabilities. One of the first things I tell my clients right away is pull your credit report. And they're like, no, he would
Yep.
never. I'm like, okay. And then they open it, right? And they're like, I just had a client recently who is on her second divorce, and she's just like, I said, what is this authorized user? And she's like, oh, that's my ex-husband. I'm like, you're still on it. She said, oh, he said he closed it. I said, this is impacting your score because there's an outstanding balance. Like, so it's really, really important. I know it's really hard. I don't take my job lightly, and the
Right.
trust that it takes, right, to bring me on, because if you're going through divorce, trust is broken in
Right.
some way, shape, or form from your spouse. And so now you have to invite me in, a stranger, and I'm going to be your financial ally. I'm going to hold your hand and I'm going to walk you through this. But I understand that that's hard to let somebody in during this time. So I don't take my job lightly, but I really, really honor clients and will be truthful and walk them through so that we get the best outcome that they want.
Yes.
And oftentimes when they're like, I'm done, I want it over, I just don't care anymore, that's the time. And I call that the power of the pause. Like, we have to take a breath,
Mm.
right? We
Yep.
have to stop. We have to slow down. I understand this is financially draining. This is emotionally draining. Let's take a deep breath and let's see the progress we made. Take a pause, and then let's go back to it with a fresh eyes, right? New energy,
Right.
sleep on it, because you don't want to make long-term financial decisions in a heightened emotional state, because you're going to end
Yep.
up regretting it. And I call it divorce remorse. You're going to end up having divorce remorse, right? If you make those long-term decisions in a heightened emotional state just to, sort of stop the bleeding and rip the Band-Aid off.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. I see people going down that road so often. What do you think that the biggest misconception is that people have about divorce finances? Like they walk in, they think something is happening, and you're the one, you feel like you're always having to tell people that's not the way it's going to work. What is the
Yeah.
biggest thing?
I think the tax impact is really hard for people to conceptualize, just because oftentimes, sometimes people bring me in sort of at the end. They've gone through the whole practice, the whole process, and maybe they're in mediation. And the mediator says, hey, you should get a review attorney, a consulting attorney, you might
Yeah.
want to get a CDFA just to, sort of review this. And then I look at it and I'm like, why? Are you getting all the retirement assets and he is getting all of the cash in the business and the rental property? And usually it's right, we had to do a trade-off to buy out the house. I didn't qualify for the mortgage, and we sort of go through that tax impact again of what this looks like on an after-tax basis, because we can draw up the prettiest, right, divorce decree with all the fancy language and all the legalese, but if it's not stress tested and if it's not going to work in real life,
Right.
then we're going to end up back in court, right? Or back in mediation. So I'd rather do it right the first time, take a little bit more time and review it and
Yeah,
really make sure that the parties understand how it fits into their real life.
absolutely. And I think you, something that's very, very valid and a lot of people don't talk about is bringing someone like you in on mediation cases is even more important for that very reason, to make sure, just to sure. I don't anyone go through and sign off on mediation until their attorney has looked, and people don't love to hear that. They're like, I wanted to save
Yeah.
money and just do the mediation. And I'm like, no. I mean,
Yeah.
you can do that if you want, but I would never recommend it, like ever.
No, same.
Uh,
And people come to me and say, okay, well, I'm going to have you review it. And I said, I can review the financial part, but I can't review the legal part, right? Like I have no
yeah,
bearing on that. Like I'm not adding any value, and you're
right,
potentially harming yourself and agreeing to something that we do. So
right,
it's worth it. And I know, right? They're drained financially and emotionally, and they just want it to be done. And that next, that couple $100 or $1,000 it takes, they're just oftentimes at their wits' end
yeah,
before any transfers are done or before any real estate is moved. But you won't regret doing it. That peace of mind is really priceless. So making
yeah,
sure that somebody second guesses, kind of goes over it with a fresh set of eyes. And I think it's really important too, because as a mediator, I don't think everyone realizes the mediator, even if they're an attorney, they can't give legal advice and they are neutral
right,
in that capacity, right? So
right,
they could be sitting there saying, okay, you agree to this. Great. My job as a mediator is that you guys came to a resolution, right? And you came up
right,
with this. They could know deep down inside that this is severely uneven, right? Not equitable, not going to work, but they can't give either person legal advice. So when they say, hey, let's get a review attorney, hey, let's get a CDFA,
right. People need to,
listen.
yeah. I think that's frustrating because I think people go through mediation and then they take it to attorney and they realize that it's imbalanced and the attorney's like, no, this is, why would you agree to this? And then they've got to go back and be the disagreeable one. And so that's frustrating. Like that part of the system seems like it works
Agree.
against people and it creates more conflict because the person who's getting the good deal probably knows they are. And they're like, oh, just got to get them to sign it.
Yeah,
And then they
just
take
push
it
the
somewhere
paper
and
across.
they're like, no, this is, but I also know multiple people who have to go back and redo, and it's so more expensive. Even if you
Yeah,
did the mediation and you rushed it and you pushed everything through, and then you have to go back and fix things, terrible. And then level
yeah.
of conflict at that point is awful.
Yeah, I always
So,
say it's easier before sort of the ink is dry to fix things than to
yes,
go back later on.
definitely. What do you think people assume will protect them financially that doesn't?
I think not everybody understands, if they were not the CFO, how the money works, right? Like they don't necessarily, like a lot of people often don't have pensions, right? So there's not guaranteed income. Social
Yep.
Security, right, is not what it looks like. And if you get divorced, if you're married for 10 years and you get divorced, you're entitled to half or half of your spouse's or 100% of yours. But there's some misconceptions there. So it's really just the mechanics of when things can be turned on
Yeah.
and where the gaps are. And so you can turn on, you can start pulling right without penalty from your retirement accounts at 59 and a half, but you don't get Medicare, right, and health insurance until 65 if you're not on it, right? So I think that's a
Right.
major issue is the healthcare costs and what
Hmm.
that looks like. So we have
Yeah.
to often bridge that gap. If you're not working full time and don't have access to a plan, does it make sense to stay legally separated if you can stay on your spouse's health insurance
Yeah.
plan, right?
Yeah. Because you
And
have to be taken off. I went through that and I was like, can't you just leave me on it? Like, it's not costing you anything. My ex-husband is a physician. Like, it wasn't costing anything extra for me to be on. So I was
yeah,
like, just leave me on it. And his practice was like, no, by law, we can't leave you on. And I was like,
yeah.
oh, that's terrible.
Yeah, and so that's
So,
sometimes what we negotiate, right? Like Cobra is expensive, right? Or but if there's that
yes.
gap time of what that looks like and how we put those pieces together. So I always say when people are in divorce and they're trying to get through the day, right?
Yep.
They are in survival mode. They are not thinking past the day, especially moms with kids, right? They're like,
Yep.
okay, we got to work,
Absolutely.
we got to pick up the kids, we got to do homework, we got to do bath and dinner, and then like keep it together, right, until bedtime and then collapse. But me, as your financial ally, I have the ability to zoom out, right? I'm not
Hmm.
emotionally tied to the
Yeah.
day to day. And I'm looking at your future 5, 10, 20 years down the line, right? Is
Right.
this the best case for you to keep this house? Because when you go to sell it, there's going to be a huge capital gains tax. And I need you to understand that now, even though you're telling me you're not sell this house, right?
Yeah.
And the retirement accounts, I have to let them know like this is not just like a normal brokerage account. There is a penalty if you take it before 59 and a half, right? That's what this looks
Yeah.
like. When you do take it, you're going to have to pay tax on it, right? If you take too much out, this might disqualify you for some help with some health insurance, right? So everything is tied together. And you
Yeah.
need somebody really that zooms out and looks at it through a different lens to be able to put all the puzzle pieces together because they're all intertwined.
Yeah. Definitely. And there's so many things to think about that we just aren't trained to think about. And I'm assuming that that's part of the answer to the next question that I have for you. But you wrote the book, Divorce by Design. What was the moment that you realized that this book needed to exist?
Yeah, it was while I was doing this work and so many people thought I just hire a lawyer and I just go
Hmm.
to court. And I saw the impact, right, of those cases versus the cases who came from coaches, right, or who had a CDFA, who stayed outside of court amicably.
Yeah.
And I said, people need to know there's other options. And I think,
Hmm.
the term mediator is now a household name. It wasn't always. And I want the term CDFA to become a household name and know that this resource exists. Oftentimes, when I meet people, what they say is like, where were you 10 years ago? I
Right.
could have used you, right? I regret things. I didn't realize what I was signing. Nobody explained this to me. And it happened with my mom's divorce, right? So it still happens unfortunately today, but it can just educate and then empower. And I think that's
Yeah.
so important because you feel so defeated through this process. Nobody goes into divorce saying, yes, this is what I wanted, right? You're
Right.
defeated. And I feel like I am part of that rebuilding process. And it's super rewarding to me to sort of let them lean on me, know that I'm giving them the guidance that they need. And oftentimes, unfortunately, right, and I'm sure you've seen this too, people take advantage of people in vulnerable situations, right? So to
Yeah.
have integrity and really hold their hand through that and be able for them to just really trust again and
Yep.
be able to rebuild their life is really rewarding.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And unfortunately, we live in a country, a society where the system doesn't always work for people. And so you need to have as many advocates in your corner as possible. And like you said earlier, it's going to cost you more. People think, oh, I can't pay one more person. I didn't get a coach because I thought, oh my God, I can't. I can't do this. Like, I listened to a million podcasts, I read tons of books. We did have a mental health neutral and a financial neutral, which was helpful, although I don't know how neutral my financial neutral was. I think he was going through his own divorce during, so he had a lot of
Biases.
empathy towards the other party. But I look back and like, oh, I see how valuable a coach would have been for me. My therapist was getting me out of fight or flight and was doing
Right.
EMDR with me and like helping me with mindfulness. I was also in mindfulness based stress reduction groups, and that was tremendously helpful to be able to learn how to
Yeah.
meditate and calm my body. And just literally, I could get drop in a meditation and then come back out during our meetings, which was very helpful. But having a coach to help me strategize a little bit more would have been great. And I think having my own financial person, because I didn't necessarily feel like it was neutral on the collaborative team, even though it probably mostly was, but it didn't feel that
Yeah.
way. So having
Yeah.
that reassurance of somebody's got,
My
like,
back.
somebody's looking out for me would have
Yeah. And
been really helpful.
yeah, I totally hear that. And I think that it's important for people to understand. And people will sometimes call me, and I've been hired and, they say like, do you want to be an advocate? Do you want to be a neutral? And, or, which capacity? And I said, that's up to you and your spouse, but understand we can't go back. Like
Right.
we pick one,
Right.
we have to stay there. So if I'm a neutral, yes, the cost is less because you're sharing it, right? But I'm looking out for the family as a whole.
Yeah.
When I'm an
Yeah.
advocate, I'm in your corner and I'm looking out for you and only you, right? And what's
Yeah. That's
best
a
for you.
big
So
difference.
it's a
It's a
big
big
difference.
difference.
And I often tell my clients that I pay for myself. Like you are going to invest in me.
Yeah.
Usually I will find my fee plus more, whether it's in
Yeah.
hidden assets, right? Whether it's just being able to negotiate and shed light on some items
Yeah.
that were not disclosed previously. And nobody regrets having a CDFA on their team.
No. I want to ask you, I don't know if you've had experience with a case like this, but I've seen a few situations where people go to court. These are people I'm end up working with afterward in their post divorce recovery, but they think that they really are not going to have much of a say. They kind of feel like their lawyer, everyone's going to present all this information. These are people who actually go to trial or think they're going to trial. So there's almost a feeling of like it's out of my control. The judge is going to decide everything. And so they almost go unprepared. Like they walk in, and I've now known of a few people where they walk in and a settlement is presented to them at the courthouse.
Yeah.
But they thought, why did I need to know all the details and my rights and what I'm entitled to? Because the judge is going to decide anyway. So, can you talk about, like, in those situations, I imagine had those people had someone like you in their corner, that they could have had a spreadsheet, like, or
Yeah.
the knowledge and the understanding of what assets they had and what would look like a good outcome for them. But they went in
Yeah.
blind and they were completely blindsided and don't even know sometimes what they've agreed to. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, we don't have a perfect family court system, and a
No,
lot of things
not even
happen.
close.
No, and it's terrible what you hear happens to
Broken.
people, which is why one of the very first things you said is, if you can take control and make the decisions together, if you can get along enough to make the decisions and not have to have a judge decide everything, that is your best. That is in your best
Absolutely.
interest.
And
It's not
even
possible
the
for
control
everybody.
of time, right? Sometimes
Mhm.
You go if somebody lawyers up, right, and now there's lawyers and you go and you have to have a meeting or a conference with a judge, you're paying your attorney to drive there, right? You're taking off of work, you're getting childcare, right, to speak to the
Mm,
judge for maybe 15 minutes and then okay, next. It's so much more cost effective to say, hey, let's meet via Zoom when the kids
yep.
go to bed, right?
Yeah.
We don't have to take off of work if we need to do this. And that's the beauty of it, to say like, hey, oh, my husband works, crazy hours, or can we do it after when the kids are in bed, or can we do it early in the morning? I'm an early riser, whatever that
Right.
is, because you start taking time off work. Right now we're jeopardizing our jobs and paying for extra childcare and all of those things. And not much gets accomplished at those conferences, if we're being honest. And same thing about being prepared for mediation. I had a client that said they were going into like one of those all day mediations
Mm,
where, spouse sits in one room, the other spouse sits in another room, and the mediator
right.
sort of bounces back and forth. And they're supposed to come up with a agreement by, the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how are you going to just show up by yourself, right? Because they're like,
Yeah.
well, we didn't want lawyers, we didn't want. I said, you understand you're now just making uninformed decisions in a room by yourself alone. I said,
Yeah.
if you had a CDFA there, right, we can sit there and sort of say, okay, this is the proposal. Nope, let's go back in real time, right? This is the tax
Yeah.
impact. This is what, we have to do. This is what the marital
Right.
balance sheet should look like, and then go back to the other side. So having that support, just having a human right with you, but having
Hmm.
somebody that could say, this is yay, we like this, or nay, no, this is a terrible offer,
Right.
right? Gives you that peace of mind, and worth the investment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Number one, just having somebody with you, period. But also having information and having
Yeah,
somebody who's not going to be triggered, who's not going to be glossed over. They're going to understand exactly what they're talking about and be working on your behalf. It's so important because the finances are complicated. It's really
yeah.
complicated. It's never straightforward and cookie cutter. One thing that when I laugh at and with my when this happens, and it happens every time, and it happened with me when I was given my financial affidavit form and told to go figure it out. I didn't procrastinate on anything, and I to get the process done as quickly as possible. But that was so hard for me to do.
Oh,
And I know
I mean,
you're
it's
not,
so overwhelming. It's so
it's
overwhelming.
so overwhelming. Once you do it, it actually is a relief. I wish I could convince people of that. I'm like, once you do this, you're going to be able to see everything very
Yeah.
clearly. But for me, it
I
was,
think,
and then
I think it
getting the
feels like
credit
a
card
test.
statements, it feels like a test. It feels like judgment.
Mm.
It feels like you're being treated like a child because you have to report everything you're spending on. And for me, I mean, it's my own baggage, but it was
But also,
terrible.
I think there becomes shame, right? That if you don't know
Yes.
these numbers right off the bat, how did I get here and why did I not know all of this? And why was
Right.
I in the dark? And did I choose to be in the dark, or was I forced to be in the dark, right? And so then it goes into that trauma mode, and then you
Hmm.
become dysregulated. And a lot of times people like do the first page and then can't get to the second page. And
Yeah.
I try to do it differently with my clients. And some attorneys will say, okay, I have another one who's stuck, like, can just do the affidavit with them. And I will just do that piece because
Yeah.
that will help them get over the hump
Yep.
to get that piece done. And I try to do it more conversational. Like if we're on
Hmm.
Zoom or if they're in front of me in my office, I'll just ask them some questions and I'll complete it. But
Right.
we're having a conversation, or they'll check their statement and look, while I'm typing it up. And it's more user friendly, and it's less of a test. And a lot of times people just sit on it and they can't,
Yeah.
that fight or freeze mode, and they can't get over it.
Right. Well, it does feel like an attack on your privacy sometimes too. I had to give, it's a little bit further, deeper dive than the financial Dave affidavit, but I had to give all my credit card statements, and then they were looking through to make sure
What you're spending. Yeah.
they verify like, okay, you say
Hmm.
you use much on your toiletries. Okay, we're gonna go. So I ended up doing a lot of that for us. My ex-husband agreed, and I made spreadsheets, and but giving them my credit card statements and knowing that they questioned like the travel expenses with my kids. And at first I was like, oh. And then once I started looking at all of it, I felt really empowered looking at my numbers.
Yeah.
I started using QuickBooks and I was like, oh, this is actually kind of cool. But it does feel, I think, like you're being treated like a child or you're being attacked. But at the end of it, you realize it is so empowering. Now, I want to ask a question, and I don't know whether this crosses over into legal advice, so you don't have to answer it if you don't want to. But I often have clients say, I'm not spending, I'm being really careful and I'm not spending. And I'm like, talk to your attorney because you want to be spending what you normally spend. These are
Yeah.
people who are going in child support. And there's a kind of a misconception, I think, that people think it'll make them look better and they'll get more if they cut back their spending. And I'm like, no, no, no. That is
Yeah.
the opposite of what you do. You don't want to overspend or spend more because that's going to make you look bad. Keep things
The status
at the
quo.
same level. Yes.
Yeah.
Is that
No,
is that what you as people too?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah. A lot of times people like, we're going to fine tune your cash flow after divorce for that post divorce, right? I'm going to do that subscription deep dive and we're going to look to see, like where are places we can cut, but now's not the time to cut them, right? We want to
Yeah.
see, and that's why we often look back for a couple of months or a couple of years, right? To see if there's anything out of the ordinary to say, this was the quality of life that we had. This is what we are accustomed to. We're not going to go from one, sort of level to another. Are there cutbacks that have to be made? Absolutely. But we don't want to do it prematurely and sort of cut off our nose to spite our face.
Yes. Yeah. My ex-husband was shocked at this travel spending. He was like, "What? You did?" I was like, "You said we could go on all of these trips." I was just traveling my little heart out with the kids the last several years and then post COVID. So it was a shocker, I think. But I was happy that that had happened because I was like, I got that travel out of my system. Now there's no time to do that. So moving ahead to, you just kind of alluded to the post divorce guidance that you give. And I think that's important. I also wish that I had had that because there was a learning curve for me to go from having a certain amount of money and not having to really worry to, okay, now I really need to have a budget. Didn't implement that out of the gate. So there was an immediate like credit matching up. And then you're like, oh, shoot, I have to
Yeah.
tame myself down. So how
Yeah.
are you helping people after everything is signed?
Yeah. That's really, I think emotionally to still have that coach and sort of see like that empowerment piece of who am I now?
Mm,
And then also financially to say, okay, now, if there was a big transfer of money in either direction moved over, how do I manage this money, right? Is the
yeah,
financial advisor my spouse's college roommate, and now I need a new financial advisor, right? Is our accountant somebody that you knew through work, right? That we might need a new accountant, right? So it's again building a team of professionals. I think one of the things that people often miss is the life insurance piece
yeah,
after.
yeah.
Oftentimes in the divorce decree, right, you're required to have a life insurance policy to cover support. God forbid there's a premature death.
Yep.
Not everyone always implements that, or they say, oh, I have a group term policy through work, right? You're not going to work there forever, right? You can
Right.
easily change the beneficiary. You can easily get fired. You can change jobs. You can retire. So that is, I think, one big sort of miss that people do. And also, the updating of the beneficiaries and your own will, right? Now that you are
Right.
single, you need to get a new healthcare proxy, a new power of attorney, right? And none of these things are fun and they cost money, but I help hold your hand through this process, right? Because you need that accountability partner. So again, you don't go back to that freeze mode, that
Right.
paralysis, like, what do I do? Who do I call? You need somebody
Yep.
to hold your hand and say, all right, here's my checklist. what can I do this week? We're not going to do it all at once, right? Am I going
Yeah.
to change my name? Do I have to retitle my car, right? Like, do I need new car
Yeah.
insurance? Do we need a new cell phone plan, right? We can no longer be on the same family plan. So there's all
Yeah.
these things that need to be done that no one really thinks about. And oftentimes they get totally missed because then life just keeps on lifing and you
Yep.
forget to go back. So again, it goes back to like the devil's in the details, and we have to go back and dot our I's and cross our T's. And I think it's really important and really to educate them like, are the investments right now based upon your risk tolerance and your time horizon? That
Right.
might be
Right.
different.
Right.
And
I
timing, I think, with support also, right? Like sometimes people
yeah.
are like, oh, my support's ending next month. Now what I'm gonna do? I'm like, can you give me a little bit more notice next?
Right.
Like we
Yes,
need to transition.
I just experienced a big drop March 1st. And the level of had
Yeah,
the drop, it was tremendous. So I probably should have booked more therapy sessions with my therapist in February
yeah,
because I was going through it thinking, my God, what am I going to do? How is this going to feel? Because I hadn't really planned. I just knew it was
right.
coming.
Yeah,
And it was, yeah. So there was like a lot of looking at subscriptions and like, okay, where can we cut back? What's just to take this edge, this feeling off. It feels
right.
so bad. So planning for that is much better, much, much, much better.
Absolutely.
And there are funny things too. Like if you have an Apple account and you purchase movies, which people don't do that as much now, but we did. So we have like a Disney account, an Apple account with all of these purchased movies, and they're in my name. And he
Yeah,
still wants to be able to watch them. And I'm like, I don't want to leave you on my account. But there's so many details like that that you just
yeah.
don't think about until
Even
you have
I,
to.
yeah, even like the miles and
Yep.
points, something too.
Yes. Yes. But it all works out. And overall, the more informed you can be, the more rational you can be, the less conflict there is.
Absolutely.
Because, like you said earlier, there are going to be things that there are going to be hills you're going to die on, and there are going to be things that you've got to just say, okay, we, it's not that important. I can cover or I can let it go because there has to be compromise if you're going to do it together, in whether it's collaborative or mediation.
Absolutely.
What have you personally had to unlearn in the process of doing this work?
I think coming into this, I had the preconceived notion that lawyers were the end all be all. And at one point in my career early on, I was intimidated by them, thinking like I was going to do it wrong. And they've been doing this longer. And the truth is, a lot of them have been doing it wrong longer, right? So
Yeah,
um, I think getting over that and knowing like what I really bring to the table and that collaborative approach, and not all attorneys are warm and welcoming to the team approach, and they want to be that big bad shark and be, the only person in somebody's corner. And those are not necessarily my people.
yeah,
But there is a whole bunch of sort of, I call them divorce disruptors that want to change the landscape, that want to
yeah,
keep people outside of the broken system, that want people to be able to divorce with respect and be
yeah,
able to, have that emotional support and stay in their lane and do it collaboratively. And I'm just really excited to be part of that and to meet people like yourself that really want to collaborate together.
yeah,
And it lights me up because it's like it it's sometimes lonely.
yeah.
So I think once somebody, right, that has that spark, it sparks it in you and it's contagious, right? And there's that ripple effect of like, yes, we can do this together. We can change the divorce landscape. And I think
Yeah.
that's really powerful.
Yeah, I love that. And it definitely is so needed. And then what you said about the attorneys being kind of, you put them on this pedestal. And so do the clients when they hire them. And so then it's really confusing when they're not advocating for them in the way that they should. And it's your life. For them, it's just a case.
Yeah.
And there are some incredible attorneys who care and who are doing right by their clients, but there are also a lot who just do not care.
Yeah.
The stories I hear more and more often, I can't believe it. I can't. I'm like, what? That can't be. Like, what did they say? And they tell
Right.
me like, so yeah, it's wonderful to be a part of and be meeting so many people who have the same positive agenda anonymous. I love the work you're doing. If somebody is listening right now and they're kind of at the beginning of this process, what would you want them to know the most?
To be curious, to look
Mm,
for a CDFA, even if it's not me, look at another CDFA. There's a lot of great CDFAs out there. We usually do, I know I do complimentary consultation. So I do a 30-minute consult and I offer what's called a financial clarity package for those quietly thinking about divorce. And it's
mm,
a limited scope package that's affordable and sort of just gets you thinking, gets your documents organized, gets sort of those best case, worst case scenarios before you're ready to have that conversation with your spouse or with a mediator or an attorney. And a lot of people find that really helpful without
yes.
fully committing, right, to the
Hmm.
process. Because it's like when you hire that attorney or when you have that conversation, you can't sort of undo it, right? So
Yeah.
it's quietly preparing. And sometimes people sit on it after the fact. Other times people will say, hey, this is not as bad as I thought. Who do I
Right.
call?
Are
And
you
some
able
people,
to give them any advice on alimony? I know child support is usually a formula for most states, but are you able to give any indication to people of what alimony might look like?
it's very state specific. So I don't want to say specifically like yes
Yeah,
or no.
right.
Every state is very different, but I can help them as to what it could look like or just really
Yeah,
manage expectations. And I think that's important.
yeah,
I say,
yeah,
I'm not always going to give you the best news. And I
right.
don't necessarily, you don't always have to like me, but know that I have your best interest at heart always. And some of the things
Hmm.
I'm going to tell you might contradict, right, what you've read online or what you see or what your friend told you.
Yes,
However, it's the truth, right? And I need to manage your expectations because I don't want you to go in and get dysregulated by somebody else telling you this in
right,
a different
right,
environment. So it's
right.
better that you process this now
Yeah.
and we
It's
sort
to
of
know
can move
what's
forward.
possible.
Yeah.
Yes. It's really good to know what's possible. Like, okay, I can quickly look up your state law and I can tell you it's vague or it's specific or it's a formula.
Yeah.
And here's, you're going to fall in between here and here, probably. Um, I don't typically, I never ever give numbers because that's completely out of my, but I will comment on number of years and a yes or no because people, you can kind of tell like if someone
Yeah.
is, but yeah, that's great. That's really helpful. And I actually have many clients who are in the I don't know yet if I'm leaving. And I would say having clarity around finances would be a really helpful thing for them to make their decision because a lot of times that's why they're not going.
Yeah.
So that's great. That's great. All of your information is going to be in the show notes, but what is the best way for people to find you and reach out to you if they want
Absolutely.
to
My
get
company's name is Mindful Divorce Partners. If you go to my website, you can fill out the contact form, schedule a free consultation, and there's a link to my calendar there. And yeah, I welcome the opportunity to speak with you. And my book will be coming out in April. It's called Divorce by
great?
Design. And I am hoping to change the divorce landscape.
That's great. Thank you so much. I love all the work you're doing and I appreciate you coming on so, so much. I wish I had access to someone like you when I was going through my divorce. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
And together we can really help more people.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Thank you. If you enjoyed this episode and you want more information about Melissa's work, it'll be in the show notes on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. You can always message me if you have more questions or message Melissa. Thank you, everybody.